Okay, our first question today is really an email exchange I had with a doc that I think is worth talking about. Basically opens up the email with, I'm wondering how you prioritize dad loans, i.e. loans from your parents. Here's my situation. I live in the super expensive Bay Area. I've been in practice 2 or 3 years. We initially rented and then bought the house we were renting for $1.3 million with $200,000 borrowed from dad at 3.5% times 30 years. So this is good. When you borrow money from family, you have to pay a reasonable interest rate, and the IRS defines what reasonable is. And it's also a good idea to have written terms there, even if you're just borrowing from family. He says, then 2 years later, I bought into my practice, ortho hand surgery, borrowed another $150,000 from my dad at the same 3.5% and consolidated the loans. Now we're considering remodeling the house in the next year or so, and dad's graciously offered another $200,000. Man, I need a dad like this. This is a lot of money so far dad's loaned you. We're up to $550, it looks like. On one hand, the dad loan is the cheapest money I can get for these things at 3.5%. But at the same time, the dad loan is the most expensive money I borrow since the mortgage is deductible. My mortgage of $1 million at 3.85%, an effective rate of 2.22%, so there's no additional mortgage deduction allowable. And our auto loan of $40,000 is at 2%, but we don't have any other debt. The dad loan poses an internal conflict for me. On one hand, I hate owing money and would like to aggressively pay it off. On the other hand, my dad doesn't want me to pay it back early. A little background on him. He's a first-generation immigrant, conservative with money, highly frugal, divorced and lives alone, owns his condo, expenses are minimal, loves loaning money to his children because he likes to help us, and would otherwise sit in a bank account earning less than 1%. So by loaning out the money, he is effectively purchasing his own annuity. Another way to think of this is basically borrowing our inheritance in advance. God willing, my dad will live forever. Unfortunately, that's unlikely to happen. So in reality, the 3.5% interest I'm paying to him will come back 1/3 to me as an inheritance. Or another way to think is if he dies within 30 years, then the loan would be covered by any inheritance and I would be off the hook. The value of his home still exceeds his total loans to my sisters and I. But naturally, I don't want to wait 30 years to be debt-free. Admittedly, we could probably pay off our house and loans within the next 10 to 15 years with aggressive savings and payments. All right, so what do I say to this guy? Well, I'd hate to owe money to my dad. So that would be a major priority for me to pay it off. I once owed my dad $3,000 for a car he gave me as a college senior. I paid it off about 3 months into my internship year. This doc seems a little bit debt numb to me. That's not unusual for a doctor because you borrow so much money in med school and let it ride through residency. It's particularly not unusual for a doctor in the Bay Area where mortgages tend to be huge because house prices tend to be so insanely high. But even so, this doc seems a little too debt numb for me. Yeah, the interest rates are low, but you've got a lot of it. I think you could stand to deleverage quite a bit. I think I'd pay off some debt before embarking on a renovation, for example. We're doing a renovation this year. We're going to pay cash for it. If you say you hate owing money, but your actions are saying that you love it. I mean, a $40,000 car loan as a hand surgeon, that's not someone who hates debt. If you hated debt, you'd be driving a $5,000 paid-for beater and sending big checks every month to your dad. If you hated debt, you wouldn't be considering renovation paid for with borrowed money. I think a quote from Dave Ramsey is appropriate here, where he says, Thanksgiving dinner doesn't taste the same when you owe money to the person across the table. So because I don't like owing money to my family, I'd make a plan to get your dad pay off in the next couple of years, if I were you. So he responded back, says, thanks for the honest advice. Debt numb, perhaps, although admittedly, I've never thought of it that way. Yes, we have a lot of debt, but what are options in our area? We like the area. We're not willing to move. My practice is great. We don't regret buying the house. It's the cheapest of our friends. That's maybe you need a new set of friends, right? If all your friends have multi-million-dollar houses. But buying the practice was a fantastic opportunity to double my income. Okay, that's a good sign. Maybe this doc can actually afford all this debt. Obviously, I left out income information between my wife and I. We bring in about $1.3 million. Okay, new story here. We're making $1.3 million a year. You can obviously afford a lot more on $1.3 million a year than you can on an income of $2,000 or $3,000. Of course, in California, that puts our effective tax rate around 45% overall. Your point about a $40,000 car loan is well taken. I could write a check for that loan right now, and maybe I should, but when it's at 2%, why? I do believe the housing market will cool off. Construction will be a little less expensive, and we like that we're aggressively funding both our taxable and tax-deferred accounts right now. And he lists out how much he's putting in those, which isn't all that much. It's about $75,000 a year. So for all those reasons, I like to keep cash on hand or invest it in anything greater than 2%. I mean, I can put it in a money market account right now and get 2.4%, right? The interpersonal relationship dynamic of family loans is different. Perhaps my family dynamic is different. I must admit that owing my dad money doesn't feel that way. He views it as a gift, thinks nothing of it. Payments are automatic, and currently I'm actually overpaying him by double simply because I have the cash and I can. But we took an additional loan from him. I would leave the payments at the same amount, so it would just cover the minimum payments. So does that additional income information change your mind at all? Is it so bad to take out $40,000 at 2% when the money can be used elsewhere? All right. So my response. Would you borrow $100 million at 2% to invest? If not, why not? If so, then what you're doing is probably fine, but it's really the same thing. I don't deny that the math works out. That if you borrow at a low rate and you earn at a high rate, you're going to come out ahead. However, doing so ignores risk and ignores behavior, and sometimes it even ignores taxes. So let's start with the taxes. Yeah, you could make 2.4% in prime money market fund right now. But borrowing at 2% and earning at 2.4%, you come out ahead, right? Well, not so much. After tax, you're borrowing at 2% and earning at 1.3%, thanks to your high California tax brackets. That's a dumb idea. So instead, you ratchet up the risk a bit and expect to earn 5% after tax. So you're borrowing at 2% and earning at 5%. The problem is that to get 5%, you're going to have to take risk. There's no risk involved in paying off a 2% loan. Pay it off is exactly the same as making 2% risk-free. 5% risky is not necessarily better than 2% risk-free. You have to adjust for the risk. If you have a very high likelihood of making 10%, then sure, I'd borrow at 2% for that. If I had a slight chance of making 3%, then I probably wouldn't borrow at 2% to do that. And finally, the most important component, which is behavior. The truth is that very few of us actually invest the difference. Instead of borrowing at 2% and investing at 5%, we simply borrow at 2% and spend. And obviously that comes out behind. Think of it this way. Everything you're buying right now, you're borrowing at 2% to purchase because money is fungible. Your groceries, your car, your vacations, your last dinner out, your iPhone, whatever. So ask yourself if you're comfortable with that. And if not, the only way to stop doing it is to pay off your debt. In my experience, very few people borrow their way to wealth like this. The same drive that causes someone to accumulate wealth, quickly at least, also seems to drive those same people to pay off their debts quickly. That's just an observation I've made. Obviously, it's possible to borrow at 2% and truly invest at 5% or 10% or whatever and come out ahead. But chances are, if you had paid cash for that car, you would have only bought a $20,000 car or a $30,000 car, or a $5,000 car. Instead, you spent more than you otherwise would have. You're justifying consuming more than you otherwise would by the fact that you can borrow at a low rate. Just like you're justifying an optional home renovation because you can borrow at a low rate. If you had to save up and pay cash for that renovation, chances are you'd wait longer and spend less on it. So I told him, good luck with your decision. Obviously, it isn't the same as ignoring a 15% credit card debt, but debt numbness holds lots of docs back. I paid off my last debt a couple of years ago. That was a 2.75% mortgage, and I haven't regretted it yet. Since then, my net worth has doubled. Coincidence? Maybe, but I think there's actually something to it. Go look around for people who paid off their student loans or mortgage quickly and regretted it. There just aren't very many of them. Even if they could have theoretically come out ahead mathematically by doing so. You can always go get another mortgage if you do regret paying it off early. And of course, to me, it seems silly to have any debt at all with an income of $1.3 million a year.
My dad, your host, Dr. Dolly, is a practicing emergency physician, blogger, author, and podcaster. He is not a licensed accountant, attorney, or financial advisor, so this podcast is for your entertainment and information only and should not be considered official, personalized financial advice.